Good afternoon, everyone. This is Annette Lawrence speaking from Denton, Texas. I'd like to welcome you to the Denton Black Film Festival Soul Talk, September 13th, 2020, sponsored by NBC5 Texas. I want to introduce you to Nikky Finney, who is our guest. Nikky Finney is the author of 5 books of poetry. Her book, Head Off and Split, won the National Book Award National Book Award for Poetry in 2011. It's published by Northwestern University Press. She is the John H. Bennett Jr. Chair in Creative Writing and Southern Letters at the University of South Carolina. She received the Art for Change Fellowship from the Ford Foundation, and she currently serves as an ambassador for the University of Arizona Poetry Center's Art for Justice Project. Welcome, Nikky Finney.
Hey, Annette, how are you?
I'm well.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I never get invited to film festivals, certainly not Black film festivals, my favorite ones. So I just want to thank the organizers of the film festival for allowing a poet to to enter stage right and to have a conversation with a dear friend. So thank you.
Great. So you had a really good way that we were going to begin this conversation. Would you like to start with that?
I did? What was that? that was days ago. What did I say?
You sent me a text message and you said, shall we,
Yes, about film.
Yes.
Yes. I feel like first of all, you and I have been friends for a long time. We didn't have gray hair when we first met, and it was in the mid-90s, and I had come to Texas to read poetry from Rice and met you and felt like I had met family. And I did. I had met family. So one of the things that I feel like one of the things I wanted to talk about today was not just some aside invitation from a art community or a film festival. I love film, and I feel like film is first cousin to what I do. Maybe poetry is first cousin to what film is, but I adore sitting in a theater back in what I call now the old country, when I could go to a theater, right, and sit in the dark at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and watch a film with maybe 2 or 3 other people in the theater, or maybe nobody else. I love that situation, and I miss it deeply. But I also love what's going on the screen as a poet, as a writer. And I feel like film, photography, the visual image is how I came to write, and how I came to write in the way that I do, and that I love to write. And so I even have a poem called Coda in a book called The World is Round, which I always, before I read from it, I say, this is my first film. And I can see everybody's face in the audience kind of squint up because they're not quite sure what I'm talking about. But I remember being a little girl on my grandparents' farm in the summer. And before I could go to sleep that night, I would replay, right? I would replay all the things I had done that day visually in my head. Mm-hmm. And it was that way that I fell asleep. And I fell asleep with comforted, curious about the next day. And so it was a very visual experience. And so soon I started to write those things down. But first I had to experience it with my senses and in a sensory kind of way. And so film is also a place where I have found hundreds of ideas for words that I haven't written yet. So I'm very close to what happens. I won't call myself a filmmaker, just like when someone calls me a photographer, I cringe, because that's I'm not there, but I do love photography and I do love filmmaking.
Yeah. I was thinking about this question and remembered that in the late 80s, my mother sent me an article an article announcing a film festival at the Whitney Museum of American Art of Black women makers.
Wow.
And at that time, I hadn't been in a space where Black women artists gathered ever before. It was my first time. I mean, I was around lots of Black people and I was around a lot of artists, but they were not, in the same way. So I made notes about the film festivals I was introduced to at that festival, and they were Julie Dash and Ayoka Chenzera and Michelle Parkerson and Franza Woods are the ones I remember their work, very, everything about it. And it was my introduction to independent film making, period.
Wow.
That's not true. I'd seen some independent films in college, but for Black and independent film, for sure, it hadn't really, I hadn't really been exposed. And so that was a formative experience for me, being in that space and meeting those artists, those filmmakers.
Why was it formative? I mean, when you say the names, I get it, but I'm just like, if you can put something specific, can you link something specific about that moment or about you as an artist or about what you do in the studio to that?
There's only culturally, only like in terms of the information I got from being in that space and hearing those particular stories from that perspective, from the perspective of those women, helped me understand more of how I wanted to represent, how I wanted to make work in the world. And I've not done much that's figurative, but it's all about time. And I think that's a direct link to filmmaking, is that time is kind of the subject of what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
There's storytelling, but not also not in a direct way. And there's tons of biographical content, which I think filmmakers are, and anybody who writes is basically telling their story,
right?
Their own story somehow,
right? Did you just pull up your journal book, your journal?
Did you calendar?
Okay.
I did search in my journals though yesterday for a little bit of time, maybe a few hours, for anything I might have written about that film festival, and I couldn't remember the exact year, so I was looking and I didn't find anything. But I have that I could find it if I keep looking. I'm sure there's something written.
Can we this would be so important for me, because I never get to talk to another Black woman artist about journaling. I don't know that I've ever talked about journaling. I'm such a journal girl. I mean, and for 4/5 of my life, I'm never far away from the book, and I'm always going back through it. Everything's dated. When something happens in present tense that might have a historical connection, I walk upstairs fast and I don't know what book it's in, but I know if I look up and that's not, book 10 is 1995 and I'm looking for 1990, I can find it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you were talking about having met those Black filmmakers at that early, how old were you, maybe?
22.
Yeah. I have moments like that as well. I have moments where I'm reading through, my parents were big Black publication people. So we had stacks of Jet magazine, Ebony, Black World, Crisis. And those were, my mom didn't really like for us to watch TV, but she loved for us to read anything that was, out on the coffee table. And so I can clearly remember looking through those magazines finding Black poets, right? But also finding Black artists, finding Edmonia Lewis. Who was going to teach me about Edmonia Lewis but Jet Magazine or Ebony? Finding Louis Maylou Jones, finding Augusta Savage, sculptor, a Black woman. Come on, this was nobody. So, I mean, Elizabeth Catlett. I wasn't going to learn those names in the school system that I went to. I wasn't going to learn it outside of my Black community. So I started writing those names down, and what they did, Romare Bearden, collage. I mean, we can talk about that when we show the picture that I did of my father.
Right.
It's not a Romare Bearden, but it is in the spirit, right, of collage. And so when I had those moments, I would go to my journal, and the permission, my little small town self needed permission and modeling to even think that I could be an artist in this life, because everybody else was doing really important other things, but not licking the tip of their pencil and writing poems.
Right. Speaking of poems, did you choose one to read?
Yeah, I think since I was talking about the film, right?
Mm-hmm.
I thought I would read just a little bit of Coda, which is in The World Is Round. It's actually one of my, no, I'm not gonna say favorite, but I love reading it because it's the way it breaks up and the images. So I'll read just a little bit of this. So just a little bit of the backstory is I spent my summers growing up on a 100-acre farm at the top of South Carolina, which is where I discovered my uncle's camera equipment that he had brought home from Vietnam. And at the end of the day, as I told you, I would go through the things I had seen, the things I had smelled, the things I had felt on this farm. My grandparents were farmers, both of them. And so we ate everything we grew. They slaughtered animals. It was just, the wonder of being there remains with me as part of the thing that shaped me as a poet. So there was only one other bed in the house where, that my grandparents lived in. And my family of 4 at the time, my brother wasn't there yet. We had to all sleep in it together. And it's also a treasured memory. We are 4 to a bed. So close our hips must come with hinges. A ticking of brown family thrown across the cotton and feather mattress of winter. Tucked deep inside the house my grandfather raised up from the red earth straight into the woolly air. The black and white photograph isn't supposed to predict the future, but my mother looks like my unborn brother. And even at 3, I am different. My Black girl eyes are a queer shade of green. At 5, my older brother stands there on the end, already buttoned into my father's sense of place. We are so close in this cherry bed. Our lightly touching hips must surely be hinged. Even the children have them. Daddy has moved into place next to Mama. Mama has moved in next to me. I am the only one awake, the only one with a wall. The whole house has fallen. The movie begins. Uncle Billy is just home from Vietnam. He is the baby. In the ruddy, speckled flicker, he stands before us with a new camera that the war bought for him. I call Uncle Billy the Bonneville man. Just like Pop Leo, he can fix anything. Unlike him, he will only drive a car if it's long and pretty. 30 years later, the Bonneville man will die with AIDS, alone in another bed without hinges. A dozen headlights polka dot the night screen wall. Every long, pretty car he ever owned drives by to pay their last respects. He snaps the picture of us all, and horns blow out in a scatter like blue Cadillac whales. We are a charm bracelet of a family bedding down for the night. We are in the outback of my mother's country. We have been laid flat for the sake of photography. The elder Aborigines bump room to rafter, watching us amazed. They whisper how much we resemble early Black and white TV. I remember when I was a little girl, I had to sleep by the wall. The wall was the movie screen. And so I would stare at the wall and see, the poem goes on to talk about peacocks and a snake I saw, and my grandfather and the other Black farmers on the road killing a hog, and how I ran in the woods with my hands over my ears because I couldn't stand the sound of the hog screaming for its life as they were hoisting it up before they slit its throat.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would see all of this on this wall. And so we were all in this little bed, and I would climb over my father, climb over my brother, climb over my mother to get to this space by the wall. And then I would just look up, and then the reel would just go all night. And so that's how this poem got to be named my first film, my only film.
That actually is a good segue to talking about Love Child,
the
new book, Love Child's Hotbed of Occasional Poetry.
What a long title. I could have shortened it to something, right?
But there's a few things I wanted to say about it. One is that there is a palpable tenderness in the way that you talk about your father and the way that your father is in this book that I've not seen before. I've not seen it in a book. I know it from my own life, but I haven't, it's good to see it in the world. And I wanted to ask you about that a little bit.
This was a hard one, but it was also easy in its own way. I thought I knew what this book was about. I thought it was about simply occasional poetry. I had been, after winning the National Book Award in 2011, a lot of people and institutions had contacted me about writing poems and commissioning me to, write something about something they cared about and asking me if I could do it. And a lot of times I said no if I, wasn't interested or just didn't attach in some emotional or intellectual way. And then a lot of times I said yes. And when I looked at the work that I had, for the past 9 years, there were all of them, not all of them, but the majority of them were occasional poems written by, like requested. And I like that because it reminded me of being a child poet and being in my tiny small town in South Carolina and being the little girl with, her notebook in her back pocket, her pencil over her ear, and people coming to know me as the little girl who liked poetry. And so they would set me up. They would say, "Hey, Miss Robinson's birthday is Sunday. Can you write a little something for her?" And I would write a poem because I thought it was what I should do for Miss Robinson as a citizen of the community that I lived in. So I had been writing occasional poems all my life and had treasured the act and being asked. So what also was happening, every book I've ever written is has intersections. What was also happening was I moved home in 2013 to take care of my father, who had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and he passed away in 2017. And all that time I was trying to pull this book together, but I was also helping my mom take care of him and also working and teaching. So there were a lot of full-time jobs, circling the globe there. Mm-hmm. So when he passed in 2017, and I looked at what I had been writing about him, and I looked back in my journals back to when I was 10 years old, I realized that there was another book shaping up, and it had a lot to do with him. My father gave me and taught me my sense of justice in the world. He wanted me to go to law school and never gave up that dream of going to law school. And I knew I was never going, but I also knew that he had taught me a lot about being accountable to people who had helped me move through the world. And that accountability always included justice issues and politics and the power of the Black community, the power of Black history that wasn't being taught. And so I knew that I wanted to sort of turn the occasional poems and what some other things that were going on to including him. So one of the lovely things that was a surprise when I got the book back from the publisher, I didn't know about it, was the art director had taken one of my father. The book it includes several letters from him, because I have hundreds of letters from him. And the art director took his handwriting and made it the cover of the book, which I love and was surprised to find there. And also his presence, I wanted to be speckled in the book as he was leaving physically the planet. I wanted his spirit, his love for me, what he taught me, why he named me Love Child, because he thought the world would call me, a Black girl, other names, just like other Black girls are called in this world. And he wanted me to know what my name was and what my name wasn't. And that's a lifelong lesson that is also, I think, included in this book. And the reason it was so hard at first to make a decision about is because I didn't want this to be how much I love my father book, because I don't know, that sounds sappy, or I don't know, but
right.
But I hear you say, I don't get to read books about Black daughters talking about their Black fathers. And I can't tell you how many people in this loving, like what he gave me, and I wouldn't be here with, so it really matters to me, because I wanted, yes, it's personal. Mm-hmm. And you and I can talk about how our art is very personal, but it's also on the scale of the human heart.
Right.
And that's important.
It is. But there's other dimensions to the book also. There's that tenderness, but there's also, as I was reading, it feels like it's sort of one piece ushers you to the next piece, and the next. That's kind of the way it draws you. But also, it's very physical. I felt physicality to the book. There's like bursting out laughing, tears. There's feeling like I'm just been left on the floor, like literally reading some of the things. Some of it feels like body blows, like just there's a relentlessness to how you are expressing your sensibility around justice that balances that sweet, father-daughter thing. But it comes from it also. It's not, those are not separate.
Right? And I've thought about that a lot as an artist. It's like, I really want you to feel the body blow. I think Black people feel the body blow every single day of their lives.
Yeah.
I also know that if I just pummel you with body blows and do not bring in the sweetness of what he taught me and what he gave me, you're not coming back for any more. You're not going to turn a page. And so it's not just a trick, for a book. It's also, it really disturbs me deeply how much and we have to talk about the violence against Black people that has always been here with us. Mm-hmm. But we never talk about, not enough, the love that Black people somehow, and I emphasize somehow, continue to have for Black people and for the world, even with the body blows that continue to come.
Right.
And I don't mean just the forgiveness, like we'll show Black people forgiving white people for shooting their son or their daughter or whatever. I'm not just talking about that. I'm talking about a deep lovingness that I have always known and always felt from the Black community, no matter what they have been subject to. And so that's also really important for me to stand firm about, because that made me. Those things made me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is good. We're just weaving our way through this conversation.
We don't know what we're doing. Don't tell anybody that.
Serendipity. So So the image that we have for share of the portrait of your dad is in the book prior to a really long piece. And in that piece, I won't say all that happens, but one of the things that happens is you're in a room, your father is in a room, and your brother is in the room.
Yeah.
And we can't say how all of that works out, but the reveal of that is one of the things that left me on the floor. So that image, Alexis, can we get that up? There it is.
So my father, my father lost his mother in childbirth. My grandmother was basically, I think, by neglect, I think she was killed by a white doctor who was drunk, who delivered my father and then forgot and left the afterbirth inside my grandmother. His neglect caused her to gangrene and die 9 days after his birth. When I was born, I didn't know this for a long time. And because my father never got to meet his mother, I am supposed to be the spitting image of her. That's one thing that I think brought us so close in this life. The other thing was I was his only daughter. The other thing is that our spirits were deeply aligned about quiet, slowness, justice. My father fought the death penalty in South Carolina, sometimes by his lonesome self, for many years when I was growing up here. His one-man tirade against the killing of another person really deeply affected me. I saw what he would do for the name of justice. I saw what he would put his life on the line for. I saw he would put his reputation on something that he felt just was morally, principally wrong. And so I hung out with him a lot in those days as a young girl, and rode shotgun when he was going to the jail to get somebody out of jail, and rode shotgun when he was going to other places. And I took in a lot of what he was giving out to the world. And so in this portrait in 2000, it says future lone dissenter, death penalty vote, South Carolina, 1973. I was in the 10th grade and there was a vote, and he was the only person in the House of Representatives. He was a member of the House of Representatives where he voted against the death penalty in South Carolina. And the picture that's in his forehead, I took from the only picture that I have of him as a little boy. He was, after my grandmother died, he was raised by a series of Black women who were aunts or wives of my grandfather or somebody in the community. And I don't know who this woman is. It's not one of the people that I know by name, but there he is in his little tie. And he's being taught right from wrong, and, the straight and narrow, and, discipline. And he's got his bow tie on. He had just graduated from law school in this picture. And I love this picture of him. I love his little thin mustache, and I love his deep set eyes. And I just made a small collage and put it in my journal of him, and pulled it out when we started working on the book. I thought it represented this poem that you're talking about, that involves my father, my brother, and George Stinney, who was a 14-year-old Black boy murdered in South Carolina in the electric chair for a crime he did not commit. And he was the youngest human being ever killed in the United States. This was in the 40s, and that has been, that record still stands today.
Wow. Um, I was going to ask you about the little pieces of tape around your father's head. But that seems so.
Okay, so you got to ask though, because you're an artist, and no one has asked me about that. I have a basket. I think I have it around here, actually. Yeah, right there. So there's a basket right there with colored pens, different kinds of tape that I've probably had for 20 years. When I'm in a stationery store, I'll, think of things. My journals are filled with collages like that, or, sketches that I've done, or charts that I've kept about things, which will arc back into conversations about, what we're going to see from you, which was why I was so drawn to your work. And so I'm always, again, the visual. I'm thinking about things. I'm thinking about words, but I'm also thinking very strongly about the images and the visual.
Mm-hmm. We should put that. Thank you, Linda. We should put the image of 1994 up.
Yeah.
Next, and that because a lot of my visual art has text in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That the bridge is there. It's this is from 1994. It was in an exhibition. It's from a series called Drawing Blood, which are works that I made using the dates of all of my menstrual cycles, putting them in a circle for 9 years, from 1990 to 1999. I did these drawings. Nice. And the exhibition that you came to in Dallas was 1996. And as we were talking, I hadn't thought about this as probably the origin of the grids I'm making now, until we were talking and said that. So,
right. And that was what, yesterday? Was that yesterday, the day before?
Just a few days ago.
Yeah.
As we were preparing for this talk. So yeah, this is the thread of and the relationship between writing and imagery is going back and forth here. I decided to use text in my work in graduate school in the late 80s because I found representations of Black life in writing, in literature, and just made a direct translation from that being where I found it to using text in the work as visual material. What came later was using data, and this, even when I was making these Drawing Blood drawings, I wasn't thinking of this as data. I was just thinking of that line of dates as a representing time.
Can we stop right here and talk about time a little bit, Annette? Because I think it's really one of the things that when I saw the exhibit, when I came to Texas and I saw your work, one of the things that really drew me in was the brown paper. I mean, I have a roller and a cutter with a big roll of brown paper on it. And when I'm doing my work on the wall, when I'm doing my, when I'm trying to figure out where my poems go, where they fall in relationship to each other, right? Sometimes I put a big piece of brown paper. This started when I was in my 20s on a wall that I always leave free in my house. There's art everywhere, but there's always one wall that's free of all that because it's a work wall. And so it's got, the paint is off because I've pulled the tape down or I put tacks in it. Yeah. But it also allows me sort of a large palette, a large view of maybe a lot of little things. And I'm drawing lines and I'm drawing, I'm color coding it with my pens over here. Maybe the things that I think go in the first movement are circled in red, or maybe there's a numerical distinction, but the brown paper, white paper doesn't do it for me. It is the brown paper that allows me full expression. And so when I saw your work, I was like, I didn't know anybody else was pulled to it, you know. And I also know that it's a recycle thing for you, and a earth, you know, earth tone thing for you as well. But can you talk about the brown paper a little bit?
Yeah, it's also a skin tone thing.
Ah, you never said that. Yeah.
Did that to you?
No.
That's in there. I used brown paper to cover my wall when I was making a painting in Baltimore at the Maryland Institute College of Art, and it was a painting on bamboo blinds, so that it was thin slats with spaces in between them. I knew that the paint was going to get on the surface under it.
Right.
So I covered the wall with brown paper, and I was much more interested in what leaked through the bamboo slats than was the image I was making on the bamboo slats in the end. So that's what started me with brown paper, was just that accidental thing that was where it was, what was on that paper was much more alive than what I was painting on the blinds themselves. So
okay. I gotta jump in here because I didn't know that. I've never heard that story before. Back to film. My dear friend Ellen Sumter, who teaches lighting at the San Francisco Art Institute and has taught it for 20 years. The best lighting person in the world. And you cannot have a beautiful film if the lighting is wrong. What you're talking about right here, to me, is about lighting, or about, right? Not the big thing you thought, you know, was going to come through the paper, but the sliver of thing that came out as a result of the big thing. And that's what lighting is. And so when I'm writing sometimes, and I'm writing into an idea or writing into a point, I'm also keeping my eye on the marginalia. I'm also keeping my eye on the sliver of light that kind of goes that way. And I'm thinking, wait, this is the big thing. Yeah, but it's the little thing that also gathers enough reflection.
Mm-hmm.
That is important to me.
And noticing that is more important than anything.
Yeah.
But there's also like the other relationship to brown bags is, when I was a child, my mother gave us brown bags to play with, and we would cut them into these like vests with fringes on the bottom. I don't know if you did that. There was also covering our school books with brown paper.
Yes, I did that too. I
preferred a brown paper bag cover than the one you can buy, or the one that was given that plastic coating on it.
Yeah.
I actually just did a piece in the last year where I just I wrapped a book in brown paper and I carried it with me for a year. And it wasn't that interesting, but I just remember sometimes the covers of my school books, when I took them off, like when I took the brown paper off, that object I was fascinated by.
Oh my God, that's
paper. Anyways, I tried to make one. It doesn't work if you try to do it on purpose. You know,
okay.
It works if it's just happening and you notice it. That thing you just said.
That's beautiful. I love that. My books were covered with those too. I mean, we had the ones that the school gave us, but they had European kids on them. You know, they had like Tom, Dick, and Harry with little hats on, and I couldn't relate. So I just so I drew my own figures on those, you know, those paper bags. That so reminds me of Toni K. Bambara, your mother giving you those bags. And there's a line where she thanks her mother for mopping around her as she was on the kitchen, as she wrote things on the kitchen floor. Her, you know, she mother never got her up. She was just like, "Thank you for mopping around me."
Right, and acknowledging the importance of the work that you just did.
Yes. So time.
There's so many things. In the drawing that you just saw, time is measured by the body, and that goes unnoticed. It goes acknowledged as an important way of keeping time. This cycle is treated like an affliction rather than the means of how we all got in the world in the first place.
Annette, I don't think you said what those dates. I don't think you
Oh,
truly said what that is.
The dates are my menstrual cycles from the first one. That's what they are. And the way I came to use them was by way of using text as image prior to making this work, and with words and other, thinking of clever phrases to say. But I went to a workshop in 1990 with the great theater director Glinda Dickerson, and she invited me to this workshop with her about Moonblood, and it was the purpose of the workshop was to help women see the cycles of their body as a positive thing rather than a negative one. And I needed that, like probably most women did.
Right.
The facilitator said that we should keep a record of our cycles in a circle.
Wow.
And I had these dates because my mother told me to write them down. Not because she thought I was going to make art out of them, but because you go to a doctor and you're a woman, what do they ask you first?
When is your last cycle?
What was your last period?
Yeah.
So I had it written down for that purpose. But when I heard that we should keep a record of our cycles in the circle, it was one of those moments where, it was a eureka moment.
Yeah.
So I started this body of work, and I was able to put myself in my work in a way that I hadn't before. I'd been I was being very objective before, I think, this, and then I was suddenly really there subjectively.
So all of my young life, I was told that I was writing far too much. I was using too much of my own knowledge about myself and my own understanding, like I needed to be more, look out at the world more and less at myself. And I always found that troubling, because that is not what I was learning from my community. My community was teaching me and telling me to value myself. And if I did value myself, then I was going to use myself as the root system, if you will, to what I wanted my art to come out of, right? And what I wanted my words to come out of. And it was conflicting because I was also being taught to be humble and, have your humility close by at all times. And so letting some of this go has been, has taken a lot of time. The things that I say as the poet that I am right now, I could never have said 30 years ago. I was trying to figure that out, and I was trying to get stronger at it. But I never wavered about it being critically important to state that I am here, basically. And also, in the same breath, I knew nobody was going to save the things that I made. I knew nobody was going to ask nobody was going to archive my life, right? Because I saw so many Black people's lives being thrown away, being obliterated, being not valued. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to save this. I got, my report cards back from first grade. So I saw that in your work as well. It's like, this isn't I'm not trying to, I didn't see an artist who was trying to inflate her ego. I saw an artist who was trying to say, I am here. This is a valuable snapshot from the human condition. In the particular is the universal, not in reverse. Not in the universal is the particular. And I saw you putting yourself on the line. even if you were with this show, I thought Annette must be, getting some feedback here or not getting the feedback, because this is really woman-centered, life-centered. None of us would be here without it, but still nobody talks about it. And so, here's my question. Do you think your work, and I pull this from, I have to tell the audience, there's a new film out on Annette Lawrence. It's not even out. It's just finished.
Fresh.
It's fresh. It's going to be coming out, and it's by
Linda Gibbs and Gibbs Media Productions.
Okay. And it's Annette Lawrence. And it's about her life, the last maybe 30 years as a conceptual artist. And so the film, I just saw it 30 minutes ago, begins by talking about the notion of conceptual art as a performance, right?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to ask you, do you think your work is a performance?
Not the work I do in my studio. When I'm working in my studio, I don't think of it that way. But when I make an installation, which the film is really about installation,
right?
That is very performative. And I mean, there's a very small amount of time to make the pieces, to actually do the installations, and that feels like a performance. Then they're up for 3 or 4 months, and then they have to come down. So it's theater in that sense. It's time. Okay. And there's always a lot of people who participate in helping me to make those.
Okay.
When I'm making drawings, it's just me.
Yeah.
Alone. So I have one part of my work that feels very much like I'm a writer. It's very similar. I think painters and drawers and writers are very similar to each other. Actually, in the Mayan language, there's only one word for drawing, painting, and writing. It's just one word, know. But in installations, there's I always need a crew, and it's most of the time volunteers, and I show everyone the knot we're making, and leave people alone to make the knots.
Yeah. And
so everybody's hands that are in it are, I feel like they own the work also. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
We're running out of time.
No way. Come on.
We have 10, 12 minutes left. And I wanted to ask you to read one more thing. And
it's kind of long, Annette.
Oh, okay. Maybe we can't read it.
I don't think we can read it.
All right. Well, I'll pass on that then.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. You want to talk about it though? You don't have to read. Tell the story.
Okay. So, Love Child's Hotbed of Occasional Poetry has things called hotbeds in it. And a hotbed has a number, beautiful number beside it. And it's a page, maybe 2 pages. And it also has ephemera. This is a Pullman Porter hat that I have here in my house that I imagine into this piece. And I had the good fortune of meeting Toni Morrison 3 times in my life. Once as a 26-year-old poet with a new book, first book out. The last 2 times, I stood in line once to get Song of Solomon signed, and once to get Love signed. And all 3 of those moments impacted me greatly as a human being and also as a writer. And so in Love Child, near the end, in Hotbed number 58, there's a moment filled with magical realism, filled with truth, filled with actual words that were spoken from Miss Morrison to myself. And that's what Annette wanted me to read, and I'm not going to have time to read it, but it's one of the pieces that I worked on tirelessly to get right, because it's conflated on 3 moments in my life with her into this one moment. Yeah. So I don't know, Annette, if I can say anything else about that, except I hope you get the book and read it and let me know if you like it. How about that?
Right. We don't want to have a spoiler. We'll just let that be.
Just let it be for that.
That's one of the it's one of the pieces, and the hotbeds are they're the thing that actually does that ushering through the book, right?
Yes.
I think between poems, between stories, the hotbeds are the thing that feels like the usher to me.
Yeah. And this is also the visual thing, right? I back to there are 3 or 4 things that are happening in the book. The hotbeds, there are 10 of those. There are 20 occasional poems. There's my father's letters that give it the kind of shape and form of something that I had never seen before, and I wasn't sure my publisher was going to go for it, but they did. And so there's memoir, there's the young poet, there's the middle ground poet, there's my first review from a book reviewer in it. There's my first reading at the Kroger grocery store in Sumter, South Carolina, because we didn't have bookstores. And I was situated between the cheese and the milk. And I had my little table and I was signing my poetry book as a 26-year-old poet. So there's a lot there that under the awning of the name my father gave me so that nobody would call me the name he did not want me called. And also because he wanted me to know that I had come from a family and a community that was filled with love, that had fought with love and fought back against so much racism, so much violence, so much misunderstanding and torture for so many years, hundreds of years, and never forgot to put love in the mix. And that's what this book tries to say, hopefully says in its own way.
Right. Thank you, Georgina. I wanted to say that also the hotbeds are journal entries. Are they just direct, like straight?
They're not direct. They've been edited, but they go back through about 20 years of journal books. And a hotbed, just, for people who, I love being outside and I love gardening. It's where you start a plant. You put it in a thing called a hotbed and you give it sun and fertilizer and food and you get it going. And that's really where my poetry comes from. It comes from those journal books that we talked about. So those hotbeds are situated there, and then you have an occasional poem, or you might have something that I drew or a letter. But yes.
Yeah, I wanted to segue into the more recent drawings, like the one from 2013.
Yes.
Is based on journal keeping. Chart calendar of when I wrote in my journals. This one is September 2013. So, I drew it in September 2013, but it's the month of September for 25 years. And each darkened space is where there is an entry. There's a journal entry. There's no indication of what is written, but that it just shows that there is writing. And that earlier drawing is the great grandmother to this, and I didn't realize it until a few days ago.
Annette, can you? This is so beautiful. Can you tell what your mom said? Remember the moment your mom said something about? She talked about remember she said something?
Yes. So yes. So I gave a talk in October at the DIA Foundation, one of their artist on artist conversation talks. And as we were leaving the space where the talk was, walking to a restaurant, my mom says, hey, your work makes me think of the Unisphere in Flushing Meadows Park. And I don't know I don't have an image of that to show you. It's part of this talk, but it's a very large globe that's just a linear representation of the globe in Flushing Meadows Park, that's close to where I grew up. And she put that together, and I hadn't thought of that. That was another gift. She's given me many ideas, and when I did work about my piano lessons. I found my theory notebooks in her piano bench. They had been there for 27 years. So yeah, so I'm so happy that she was able to be at that talk, that it's actually available online if folks are interested in seeing it. So thank you for remembering that story.
Well, they always tell Black girls, they always tell Black people that in their own way that your life, you have to pull from somebody else's life in order to write what you need to write. And I'm always saying, I need to pull from my life. I need to pull from the hundreds of letters that my father wrote me throughout the whole, line of my life. There are your notes in your mother's piano bench. In the particular is the universal. In the Black particular is the universal. And so that's what I love that's happening in your work. That's what I love that is celebrated in your work. And I'm so glad we've been able to have conversations that feed, the visual, feed the poetic, feed the lifeline of us as Black women in the world, and also see the film that we are making in it all.
Right. That's beautiful, because it circles back to being in the room with those Black women filmmakers. Yes. and also understanding the work I do, the work that you do, as part of this continuum. That continuum is a deep well, of inspiration and,
right.
And cultural contributions that we draw from.
Yes,
so we draw from the same well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right.
So,
I don't know what time it is. Okay, we have 3 minutes. I have to wrap. I want to acknowledge NBC 5 Texas again for sponsoring this series, and I want to ask that folks join the Denton Black Film Festival in January. We will be doing a hybrid live and virtual festival. Also follow us on social media at Denton BFF. Thank you, Nikky Finney, for this hour of great conversation. And thank all of the people who tuned in for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Thanks, Annette.